1, 2.
1, 2. Is that on? Is this on?
1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1,
caritas. Where there is charity, where there is love, affection, esteem, favor, or dearness, et amor, and love or affection. Deus ibi est. There is God. I invite you to rise in body or spirit. Let's sing our opening hymn. It's one of my favorite. And Reverend Chris isn't here, but I told him you all can do this in French. Not this one, this one. Let's sing. So welcome to the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. My name is Nathan. I'm one of your ministers. I am pleased to welcome you today. If you're a visitor, welcome. We have so much good stuff coming up today and in the near future. And if you want to know more about joining this church, just come talk to me. Okay, here we go. Right now, during and after the service is a blood drive. So if you feel like you have too much blood and whoever makes up the rules about who is able to give away blood and who is not says you can give away blood, you are welcome to give away blood. Between the services, and this is online people who are local as well, we're going to actually have children in one class, and in room one and all the adults in the fellowship hall, we're going to be making candles. Last week we did kind of an art project that was about our wishes for the larger world. Today is wishes for us. So that's what we're doing during middle hour. Adults hate arts and crafts until they do it, and then they love it. So that is my challenge to you. Next thing we need one good volunteer or a family volunteer who A, has a phone, B, has the ability to send me a video from their phone, and C, has the time and desire this week to dress up like Caesar. Do I have a volunteer? Because I won't announce it at the next service if I have a volunteer now. There is no more information. Online people, if you want to do it, type it into the chat, and whoever is monitoring the chat will run in here or text me and tell me. What? No, do we have a Caesar? Do we have a Caesar in the back? Is that it? We have a Caesar? Yes or no? I need confirmation because I'm going to keep doing this unless...
Do you have a costume?
We'll walk through all of that. You need a phone, a willingness, and the ability to send it to me. We have Caesar?
Let's talk after.
All right.
I tried to send you a video before and it didn't work.
All right. We may have a Caesar. All right, you all are off the hook. Which leads into next Sunday is our annual impromptu pageant. Our minister emeritus used to climb a ladder on the chancel, which I think is too dangerous, so we're going to video Caesar. Everyone else come ready to enjoy yourselves, and many of you will be grabbed before the service to get dressed for the pageant if you want to be a part of it. Also, next week we are doing a child dedication, which will be the first one since we had the shutdown. So if you have a child that you would like, a baby or a child that you would like dedicated, please let me or Kathy know. We're doing it at both services. And, oh yeah, there's a thing coming up next week you should know about. Next Sunday is the pageant. Then on, why do I keep forgetting this? On the 20th, Monday night or Tuesday night? Tuesday night, we're doing our solstice service here at 7 o'clock. It will be streamed online as well. Then the 24th, we will have 2 Christmas Eve services, 5:30 and 7:30. They will be exactly identical except for some of the music because the choir doesn't want to spend 5 hours at church on Christmas Eve for some reason. I don't understand. But they said they would like to be with their families. So 2 services, the music will be slightly different, but everything else will be the same. December 25th, we will not...
Which one will the choir be at?
You have to come and find out. On the 25th, we will not stream the service. It will be in person only and at 10:15 because it's the only way we can sort of not overburden the staff and it's a lot of people are going to be with their families and a lot of people are going to need church. So that's what we're doing. And then January 1st is regular old boring church. Hallelujah. So that is our glad you're with us. Now we are entering into a time of year where this part of the earth gets colder. Green gets harder to come by, and the light gets less and less. Light gets really, really hard to come by. This Advent wreath is one remedy to that natural tendency of loss. When the world makes it more difficult, just as all good religious communities do, this church is here to make things a little easier. Each week leading up to Christmas, we light one more candle. Each week will give us more light at a time of year when we lose it. This Sunday, the 3rd Sunday of Advent, we light our 3rd candle. This is for joy. In these times, it can be hard to find reasons for joy. If joy feels distant or hard to see, may this candle help you find more joy in your life. May this candle help us find more joy in the world. Also, we have cards. We have cards out there. One is for a member of this church, Megan Sheehan Dean, who broke her wrist, and so we're thinking of her. And also, one is for, would you place the stone, Bobby, for Janet Mulder's aunt. This is, Pat Power died this week. This ritual that we have is for everybody, visitor. Now, we're going to do the stones first. Bobby. We're going to do the stones first. No, come on up. This ritual we have is for visitor and member alike. It is where we come forward either along the west or the east wall, take a stone, let it represent whatever's on your heart, whatever's on your mind, place it in the chalice bowl. We now invite those who wish to come forward as we place stones. and we say together, with hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love.
I ride bus. My 3-year-old is almost completely nonverbal. Every day when she gets off the bus, I ask her the same question. I ask her how your day was. And every day I get the same answer. Mama, I ride bus. I ask her what she had for lunch and who she played with. I ask her if she went outside or made a new friend. No matter what I ask her, her answer is always the same. Mama, I ride bus. I'll admit, when she was first diagnosed with autism, I cried a lot. And when she And when she worked for months, with birth to free, a program for infants and toddlers with disabilities. With not much improvement, I cried some more. When school started, I realized just how far behind the other kids she really was. There were more tears. I don't know whether I cried for her or if it was for myself. I get angry when people mistreat my daughter or ask me. I worked with disabled kids. I get angry when people mistreat my daughter or ask me what's wrong with her. I get mad when people avoid her and parents pull their kids away. I struggle when I don't know how her day was, or if she had made a new friend, or if anyone played with her at all. But all I really wanted is for her, my kids, to be happy and healthy. Her health is great, and each day when she gets off the bus, she, with as much joy as she did the very first day, and with as much enthusiasm as she can muster, Mama, I ride bus. And for me, shouldn't her joy be enough?
Let's go ahead and sing another hymn. I invite you to rise in body or spirit.
Rise up, shepherd, and
We've made it to week 3 of Advent. I just want to clarify also, especially for the online people, that's not your daughter we're talking about. It's from a thing called Braver Wiser. If you don't get that, by the way, every Wednesday the UUA sends out a reflection, like that's really nice. And so you can, I don't know, Google Braver Wiser and they'll have some way to sign up. But we've made it to week 3 of Advent. We are halfway there. Remember that Advent is that time of waiting. And this week's theme on waiting is joy. So today we're going to explore what joy means and more importantly, where it lives for you and what it means to wait for joy. Last year I wrote the sermon for joy, but I thought it was hope. So the service we did last week was the one I did for joy, and then Saturday night I looked and I realized I wrote the wrong one. So this year we are good, we're up to date. And for hope, last week we did the deep dive into the biblical story according to Matthew's gospel. We also talked about what you could do when Christmas is hard for you. I shared a reading I found that compared the stars to God and said that the stars don't care whether you see them or not, or whether it's dark or not, but if you want to see the stars, you need to go find darkness. It was a service to comfort all those who have crossed the line from a happy Christmas to a sad Christmas. And every Christmas season, every good church should hold both those who live with joy and those who live with sorrow, and especially those who live with both. Because Christmas is a time where both emotions get cranked way up. But today is a focus on joy. And joy is different than happiness. Many Christians might tell you that joy is that internal happiness that comes from a life with God or a life with Christ. And I know for many of you, you may need more interpretation on that. Joy is not happiness. Happiness is something external. So like eating brownies for me is happiness. The memory of brownies at my favorite vegan diner, which was the first all-vegan restaurant I went to in Texas in 2005 when General Assembly, the first time I ever attended a national gathering of Unitarian Universalists that met in Fort Worth, and I was able to go to that diner and eat that brownie, that is joy. Does that make sense? Joy is something that comes from within you, whereas happiness is external. I always have the memory and the taste of that brownie, whereas if I eat one, that's the happiness. Our spiritual work is to trust that within you there are natural and divine springs of joy, and our job as a religious people is to find ways to cultivate those springs. So to start the service, and more specifically, to start you jump-starting your own springs of joy, I made a brief list of some of the things that brought me joy. And because the list could go on too long, I narrowed it down to specifically Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. This is, of course, not a comprehensive list, and it is not intended for you to in any way worry about my weird things. It is just meant to turn up to help you think of some of yours. So here it is in kind of maybe chronological order, some of the Christmas joys that I have. First joy I remember is getting an airplane transformer when I was 4. I was not old enough, nor did the gift giver realize that it was a Decepticon named Starscream. I had to Google that. But he was one of the bad guys. And so my first transformer ever was the bad guy. There was the one time in junior high, my family took me to Covington to see a Christmas Carol. It was really cold outside, and they had like apple cider, like hot apple cider you could get during intermission. And they've never taken me to a Christmas Carol before or after, and I'm sure the apple cider was just some like apple juice with a cinnamon stick and a coffee urn. But to this day, when it is cold and Christmas lighty outside, I taste that apple cider. I get joy from the advice my mom gave me in high school. See, in high school, I was really into Jesus Christ Superstar. Not at all as predictive of my vocation, just it happened to be a play I was into. And I heard that there was a rendition of it put out by white progressive folk artists like the Indigo Girls, and I thought that would be a really cool gift, and so I asked for it. And instead, I got the Rammstein, which is a... So very few of you know this. It's a German death metal band. Slovenian, I apologize. Slovenian death metal. Online people, that was my own thoughts, realizing, and not someone in the congregation telling me. But it was a Slovenian death metal band. And it was the very last time as a pre-adult that I was actually brought to those visceral tears that come from childhood disappointment. And my mom gave me this advice. She said, yeah, Christmas is all about disappointment. It's true. Plenty of good gifts. That was not one of them. The last Christmas before I went off to college, my parents trusted me enough to drive. I lived in Seidel, and they let me go to a Christmas Eve party in Algiers that a member of the youth group's family was throwing. It's the first time I both got access to my church in a way that allowed me as an independent entity and on such an important religious day. Every Christmas day for about 50 years before I was born, until about a year or two before the shutdown, we would always go to my great Aunt Flo's house. And before that, it was my great great Aunt Ethel's house. And we would eat the same food and have the exact same ritual that we did to make Christmas happen on that day. And my family had this weird habit of inviting people that we didn't know to come. No one knows who invited them. And this one couple that we affectionately called the Costanzas. So for those Seinfeld people, the Costanzas, George Costanza is one of the characters, but his parents are like a very old, angry couple. And this old, angry couple yelled at us and me a lot, specifically when I would not eat their food. Like, they would always bring hogshead cheese and these giant shells stuffed with meat, and they would not even get to the point of hearing that as a vegetarian. But that still brings me joy. The first time I was ever away for Christmas, we were living in Washington, D.C. We didn't have enough money to come home. And so we Skyped in on Christmas with our families, but we didn't really get good Wi-Fi in the basement apartment. So we'd have to hold the laptop by the garbage cans. And by garbage cans, I mean we had two windows that overlooked garbage cans. And that was the only place we could get Wi-Fi. And I had a goal of making every Christmas dish that my family always ate, but making it vegan and only for two people. And I did find out that vegan marshmallows do not broil in the same way, that instead they balloon and catch on fire. But that memory of my first Christmas with my new family, but not my original family, brings me joy. First time I ever attended church on a Christmas Eve, this was a weird one for me to realize today, was when I was your assistant minister in 2012. And I got to be a part of watching our minister emeritus, Steve Crump. For those of you who are newer, who don't know, Steve loved Christmas to an absurd degree. And his services did not ever not include snow that he kept in his freezer for maybe a year that he used to make a snowman, or other such things that I hate to spoil for you. I will not be able to replicate this Christmas Eve. There was a joy I felt when my son, at 2.5, I told my family he liked musical instruments, and they just wouldn't believe it, and they decided to give him a guitar that still survived through a miracle of science and nature. But the look on his face when he opened that guitar, I will never forget it. It has actually been harder to find joy these past couple of Christmases because of the whole everything. Shutdown year for Christmas. Because the service was fully pre-recorded, we decided to drive to the levees and look at the bonfires. We didn't know they weren't doing bonfires. So we came home, put our 1-year-old to bed, and the three of us stayed up and watched the Christmas Eve service here. Then we put our then 3.5-year-old to bed, and I stayed up until about midnight, going on YouTube, searching the word Unitarian and sorting by most recent, and watching probably dozens of my colleagues and your fellow religious leaders, and watching how they were comforting and providing service for their people on that Christmas Eve. 2021 Christmas Eve, I was ready to be your senior minister and to do the Christmas Eve service. And I got COVID. So this year will be my first Christmas Eve service as your senior minister, 2 years in. Of course, this list does not include all of the deaths and all of the losses that seem to accumulate over time, along with all the things that try to extinguish that ever unextinguishable ember of joy that is within all of us. So this year, this is the year I am looking forward to, and hoping you can as well, to find a way to reignite that spark of joy that so much circumstance has tried so hard to put out. I hope that we can find all the sources of joy that spring from deep within each of us.
Okay, I hope I can get through this one. I read that other piece 1,000 times, and I never saw all the special needs kids I worked with. I never saw their faces when I read that before. Okay, sorrow is everywhere, slaughter everywhere. If babies are not starving someplace, they're starving somewhere else. But we enjoy our lives because that's what God wants. Otherwise, the mornings before summer dawn would not be made so fine. The Bengal tiger would not be fashioned so miraculously well. The poor woman at the fountain and laughing together behind the suffering they have known and the awfulness in their future, smiling and laughing while somebody in the village is very sick. If we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. We must risk delight. We can do without pleasure, but not delight. Not enjoyment. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world. To make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. If the locomotive of the Lord runs us down, we should give thanks that the end have magnitudes. We must admit there will be music despite everything.
Can I invite you into a moment of prayer and reflection? The God that we know when we see love and kindness and hope and compassion and joy, be with us on this day. That mystery named and unnamed, be present for all who need it. Help us to reconnect with whatever that spark of joy is from childhood or from adulthood, whatever that thing is that transcends all, that helps us know we are good and we are worthy, and that this complicated world is beautiful and worth loving. Help us to love all people and make this world better for us being here. Amen. Right where you're seated, let's sing this next hymn.
From angels bending near the earth,
How many of you know the religion of the person who wrote that last hymn? This is kind of a trick question. All right, 2 of you know it. Yeah. So that was written by Edward Sears, a Unitarian minister. From what I've read, he was pretty depressed on Christmas when he wrote it. This was right after the Mexican-American War. He had just finished a failed ministry at a larger church in Lancaster, Massachusetts, and been welcomed back to the first place he served, a much smaller church in Wayland, Massachusetts. This was in the time of the Fugitive Slave Act and the build-up to the Civil War. And I can't exactly say what things were like in Massachusetts in 1849, but I would guess it felt pretty bleak if we're going to judge on the fact that many of our most sad Christmas carols seem to come from white Unitarian ministers of that time. This hymn stands out because it doesn't focus on the nativity. There's not much Jesus in there. In fact, a lot of Christian churches have edited that hymn to put more Jesus and Christ into it, which, for us as Unitarians, if you read this hymnal, it is full of edited hymns. So good for us. We get to be on the other side of the edits for once. The hymn is based off of a poem that he wrote. We actually don't know. Apparently he wrote this poem, and then he either sang it for some kids at Sunday school or at a party at his house. We're unclear, and then the tune came later. But he published this in a book of sermons, and the sermon immediately following where he placed it in the book is a Christmas Eve sermon that he titled One Mediator. Now you have to understand, in 1849, Unitarians were still Christians. Unitarians were not merged with Universalists. And on this Christmas Eve service, he said that there are people, and there is God, and that there is a mediator between them. He said that Jesus Christ is that mediator. I will invite you to interpret that for our modern days, as these messages of love and justice are the mediator. That they will always take priorities over the whims of the state and those in power. That humility and an anger for a better world, and aligning with those society has cast aside or made expendable, that is how we bring about heaven on this earth. Those messages, the word, so to speak, is the mediator between an ever-loving God and the suffering that humanity puts on itself. So I'd like you to hear what one of our religious ancestors preached on Christmas at a time of great violence and hopelessness and divide. Remember, he is talking about Jesus being a mediator between God and among violent, warmongering people. In his sermon, he says, "For God has no hostility towards his creatures," and I'm keeping how Sears gendered God in this. "The enmity is all on one side, and the fearful chasm and the antagonism between the divine nature and human nature, do not require any treaty making going between, that God may understand us and may be placable towards us." In other words, there is no need for reconciliation between the two because one did nothing wrong, according to Sears. Similarly, I deal with this a lot with members of my next generation of family, where one is the offender and the other is just the recipient of the offense. And reconciliation is not necessarily that both admit what they did wrong, right? So that's the God-people thing Sears is talking about. He continues, "The thing needed is not an arbiter to settle disputed points, but a channel rather through which divine life and energy can flow. Suppose this mediator then not merely to come between two parties, but to embody the whole spirit and moral power of the rightful one, and dissolve their hatred beneath the touches of his own spirit, and that they throw down their arms and strike their banners and say, "We are reconciled, and we will rebel no more." This will give more completely the burden of the text, "There is one God and one peacemaker between God and man." I was struck by this because I can feel myself in Sears' place. This is a difficult time for clergy. And he probably felt like the world was terrible and like maybe it was falling apart and that it was hard to find hope, let alone joy. But also, he was calling on a mediator, make that your conscience, or God to come and provoke hope and joy within your spirit. In other words, suffering is not a part of God's plan. It is because enough of us are out of touch with the divine that we need a mediator or a conduit of faith and hope and love and peace and joy. To translate, if we can get back in touch with our sources of joy, if we can enjoy the gifts of being alive and being in community, that is how we bring about an end to suffering. And in a segue that you probably did not see coming, Sears' understanding of this mediator between humans and God and our untapped sources of joy is the reason why I find The Walking Dead an unrealistic depiction of the zombie apocalypse. It's true. A few years ago, I was in Washington, D.C. I'm going to come back to that. In Washington, D.C., we were attending All Souls Unitarian Church in D.C., and their assistant minister, Rob Keithan, was preaching, and just like 2 paragraphs in the middle of a very long sermon, he said this thing about joy that I have kept coming back to so much, I actually even asked him to record himself saying it so you could hear it. And in it, he says that joy is the secret of resistance, because we need joy in order to keep going. And this is really apparent when experience as a common difference between events planned by individuals or organizations from marginalized communities and those planned by people or groups with dominant identities. Those led by marginalized communities are much more likely to incorporate joy and art and dance. Is there anger and outrage? Yes, of course. But there is more than just that. At events led by those with dominant identities, it is much more likely that there will only be anger or outrage, albeit with a song or two. What I think it highlights is that when you don't have the privilege of taking a break from injustice, you don't take a break from joy either. Instead, joy becomes all the more important. And so, when you are writing a TV, this is me now, when you are writing a TV show or a book or any medium depicting people struggling, if you do not have them making jokes and laughing and enjoying themselves, then it is not written by people who understand suffering or oppression. Go ahead and watch Walking Dead. They make 0 jokes. It's serious the entire time through. Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, Bridgerton, The Wire, all make time for jokes. That is my measure of a good show or not, by people who understand joy and suffering. If you want to know the quality of the show, look for if people are laughing when things are hard. End of that part of the sermon, because I can't transition this very well. We are now going into the offering. We are sharing the offering with the food bank of Baton Rouge. There's a lot of people who really need food all year round, but especially right now. So I will ask you, and remember, half goes to the church because we need money also, but half goes to the food bank. So I will ask you to now give very generously. And online people, you can do the give stuff all online too. I mean, you in person can as well if you don't like the bursars. I now ask you to give very generously as this morning's offering is gratefully given and received.
Okay. Let's see, where am I? Okay. This is Reading the Battle for Christmas by Stephen Nessenbaum. In early modern Europe, roughly the years between 1500 and 1800, the Christmas season was a time to let out steam and gorge. It is difficult today to understand what the season feasting was like. For most of the readers of this book, good food is available in sufficient quantity year-round. But early modern Europe was, above all else, a world of scarcity. Few people ate much good food at all, and for everyone else, the availability of fresh food was seasonally determined. Each summer and early fall would have been the time of fresh vegetables, but December was the season for fresh meat. Animals could not be slaughtered until the weather was cold enough to ensure that the meat would not go bad, and that any meat saved for the rest of the year would have to be preserved by salting. December also was the last month when the year's supply of beer and wine was ready to drink. And for farmers, too, the period marked the start of a season of leisure. Little wonder then that this was a time of celebratory excess. Excess took many forms. Reveling could easily become rowdiness, lubricated by alcohol. Making merry could edge into making trouble. Christmas was the season for misrule, a time when ordinary behavior restraints could be violated with impunity. It was part of what one historian called the world of carnivals. Sounds like Mardi Gras. Christmas misuse meant that not only hunger, but also anger, lust could be expressed in public. Still sounds like Mardi Gras. Often people blacken their faces to disguise themselves as animals and cross-dress, thus operating under the protective cloak of anonymity. The Puritans understood much of the seasonal excess that took place at Christmas was not merely chaotic disorder, but behavior that took a profoundly ritual form. Most fundamentally, Christmas was an occasion when the social hierarchy itself was symbolically turned upside down in a gesture that reverted distinguished roles of gender, age, and class. During the Christmas season, those near the bottom of the social order acted high and mighty.
So when I have an associate read a reading, I usually don't put in the notes of asides I'd love for them to say. But the last time I read that reading, I put in those asides of, this sounds like Mardi Gras, this sounds like Mardi Gras. I found that there are a few magic holidays in the year. Halloween, Christmas, and Mardi Gras, for me, they seem to tap into holy springs that connect us to something divine, that can fundamentally alter how the world feels and how we relate to it. They are powerful. The Puritans saw this joy and the accompanying chaos, and they sought to stop it. I think it's because they didn't think they could trust God like the Universalists could, but that is a sermon for another day. It wasn't until the old Unitarians and Universalists started trying to celebrate Christmas again in America that it started moving back into popular culture. The Universalists in the 1700s, all of their ordinations, installations, building dedications all happened on Christmas Day. The Unitarians, a lot of the rituals, the Christmas tree, a lot of the carols you sing, a lot of those come out of Unitarian churches. So we are in Advent. We aren't on the magic day where we can tap into those holy springs as easily. Instead, this is a period of waiting and preparing. And we are waiting for joy. I think of it this way. As I said earlier, every year for a long time, my family got together at my great aunt's house. And it was like a fancy-looking house in New Orleans, and the front doors were not stained glass. Like, what is glass called when it's stained glass but it's all see-through? It's just a decorated door. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, leaded glass. Leaded? Yeah, lead. Don't lick the glass. Leaded glass. Got it. And every year we'd get together around 1 because my great aunt was very Catholic and she had to go to Mass, I believe. Or maybe we were doing Christmas. Anyway, we'd get together around 1. We would eat dinner around 2. Around 3, the adults were not done eating dinner, and we would go into the living room around the same flocked Christmas tree. I mean, you got a new one every year, but it was in the same spot with the same presents that were there since my parents were kids. And we would wait and look at those presents, and I think the adults took extra long eating just so they wouldn't have to deal with it. But usually around 3:30 or 4, the sunlight hit that front door in such a way that it made rainbows all the way down the hallway. And that's how we knew it was time to finally open the presents. In Luke's gospel, Jesus' birth was told to shepherds, people who had no business having access to the divine in Roman times. These were working people who, and I don't have time to get fully into angels, nor do I spend a lot of energy fully trying to figure it out, so this is not a deep angel service. But for now, I'm thinking of them as mediators of a message from what that thing is that is holy within all of us, that is greater than the world. Whatever it is that helps us to see the world as it truly could be or should be, I would encourage you to think of angels as a mediator of that. But these working people found that channels between, as Seer says, channels through which divine life can flow. In Luke, they didn't bring gifts. They didn't follow a star. They just knew something had happened and they left their life for something greater. And when they got there, they didn't come to a home or a place where you would expect to find the birth of hope or of joy or of love or of peace. They came and found a birth in a stable. They found it in a time where joy seems hard to come by. The goal of this church, the goal of any good religion, is to help you clear off all of those things that are keeping you from seeing that spark of hope and faith and love and joy that is truly within you and your body and your soul. The goal of this season is not to let any tragedy, any death, any sadness, any injustice put out the joy within you, because it cannot. It is innate. It is a part of who we are. It is how we honor the goodness of being born, the goodness of being alive, and the sacredness of death. Joy is not something external. It's not something we gain access to if we have the right presents or decorations or alcohol or relationships in our family. It is something that belongs to each of us. And if you can't find it right now, this church is here to help you find it. There was a hymn we sang earlier in the year, and one of the lines was, "This joy that I had, the world didn't give it to me." And the part that I didn't pay attention to, it said, "And the world can't take it away." I like that, and I want it to stay with us. So if we're going to spend our last minute of the service on angel metaphors, which apparently this whole service I can't get away from, there are these mediators, this connection to that joy that a 3-year-old can experience with her love of riding the bus. a joy innate in all of us, in that world that tries so hard to take it away. Sometimes you just have to wait for the sun to hit the door at the right angle to know it's time to have access to it. When you sing this closing hymn, please know that when we sing angels, what we mean is that relief and celebration that can come from the realization that you will always have access to joy and to love. And it's a celebration of any time you find these channels of love and of new hope opening in your heart. It's not just the promise of a new generation, it's the promise that every day you wake up with a possibility to tap back into that joy and to make this world a better place. Not because you even did anything, but because you existed. Please know you are good, know that you are loved, and know that the world is better because you are here. Amen. Let's sing. I invite you to rise. If you're watching this later, I hope you have great weather, but picture it's not. Don't let this bad weather ruin your day. It's better because you are here. The world is better because you are here. Go in peace. Go in love. Amen.